Thanks, David. It's great to be here. Steve, thank you for coming.
It's my pleasure, of course, Rob.
So I always wonder, what does an ISO head say to the person sitting next to them on an airplane about what you do?
Well, usually I tell them it takes too long, the flight's too short. But the ISO, look, there are several of us in the U.S. The California ISO is the only organized market in the West. And essentially what we do is provide open access to the transmission system and let competitive horses fly. But fundamentally, day to day, we balance the grid every 4 seconds. Every 5 minutes, we optimize the grid. And we run a day-ahead market and an hourly market and a 5-minute spot market to be able to find the most efficient dispatch, taking into account 26,000 miles of transmission. And annually, it's about $9 billion a year that runs through the ISO. That's the elevator speech.
Good. So you keep the lights on. I think we have a picture of who's actually operating the system. They're sort of like air traffic controllers on the grid?
A lot like that. And the challenge we have, or the opportunity we have, is, that's our control room, and they're down there now, I hope, making sure that...
I thought the lights went black when you left the state.
Yeah, no, they're usually pretty good about that. 12-hour shifts, they're good folks, they work hard. As the grid becomes more complicated, as distributed generation comes in, as central station renewables come in, as you get more inflections on the grid, the challenge is getting a little more difficult. But it's a cool opportunity, because it's a cool opportunity, in California's case, to show the world how it can work. And we want to do it as efficiently, as effectively as we possibly can.
Good. So, and you have how many renewables now in your roughly?
Well, I'm glad you asked. This last weekend, let me just give you a percentage of load, then I'll give you total counts. Just this last weekend. Now, I want you to keep in mind, California is the 7th or 8th largest economy in the world, depending on how Italy and Russia are doing at any given time. And I think it shows a model of, do you take a large economy, can you actually decarbonize the economy? And in California, we're showing the world that yes, you can. This last weekend, we had over 50% of our load being served by renewables. We had somewhere on the order of about 12,000 megawatts of renewables serving load. Really sunny, and the wind was blowing. Everything was matching up really well. We have about 5,000 or 6,000 megawatts of wind on the system. We have about 7,000 megawatts of solar on the system. We have geothermal and other things as well. But more importantly, we've gone to 33% by 2020. We're ahead of schedule on that. And then we expect to go to 50% renewables on the grid by 2030, and I'm fairly certain we'll be ahead of schedule on that too.
So you can do that reliably. You can do what you're currently doing, and you're looking out 10, 15 years to the 2030 goals, and you think you can operate the system, keep the lights on, even though the wind isn't always blowing and the sun isn't always shining, as all the opponents of renewables say.
Without question, we'll be able to manage the grid at 50%. Now, the key, though, is you can't keep doing things the way you do. What's really important, particularly in California, it's a sunny place, we have a lot of solar, but concentrating just on solar creates this big dip in the middle of the day, and you create overgeneration in the middle of the day. Now, I don't want to say that solar is a problem. I think solar is an important component to it. It's critically important, though, that you have a portfolio of resources. Historically, the planning on the grid was always, let's have a portfolio of resources, whether it were, gas or coal or nuclear or things like that. The same thing holds for renewables. You need wind, you need solar, you need geothermal, you need the whole portfolio effect.
Great. And so what kind of changes do you need, if any, to get to those higher levels of penetration?
Well, I call it connecting the dots, because California has a couple 100,000 electric vehicles right now, and ramping up to hopefully a couple million electric vehicles. When do those vehicles charge? How do they charge? And I think the policy around those, so connecting those dots around the way wind and solar provide power to the system, I think is important. Also important is that you get the regional effect of renewables. And California being the only organized market in the West, one of the things we're doing is we're looking at regionalizing the ISO. The good example of this is that Iowa has a significant penetration of wind, as you all know. They're on the path to go to 85% renewables and at some point to 100% renewables on the grid. They can only do that because they're part of the Mid-Continent ISO, this big ISO, and you can use lots of geographic resources to be able to manage the system. It's going to be important for California too, because I don't anticipate California stopping at 50%. I expect us to go higher and higher and higher, and to be able to do that, we're going to have to regionalize.
Got it. So first, it's not like every wind generator has to have full output 24/7. The pool has to have full output 24/7, and that's your job, and that's why you're so important to making this all work.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, the California wind can correspond with perhaps the Wyoming wind or the New Mexico wind. I was up in Wyoming the other day, and frankly, it even made my hair blow. So it was pretty impressive.
That's good. Well, Chris Brown, our new board chairman, said regional coordination was a key to the future. So that's exactly what you're doing and exactly what we're trying to support. And I ask everybody here to help us support that. Well, if you're not part of powerofwind.com, get on there and help us support these regional initiatives. So we got to wrap up, but just last quick question. Do you think we can do this? We can get to 50%?
And beyond, Rob, and beyond.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.